And joining us now is Lubbock City Councilwoman for District 6, Ms. Latrell Joy. Ms. Joy, thanks for coming on Talking Points.
You're welcome.
So it's been a very busy week for you and the rest of the council members getting the budget and the new tax rate for the next fiscal year done. Tell us, what are the highlights from that huge new $1 billion budget that you think people really need to know about?
The highlights are that your tax rate actually went down 4 cents. But because the legislature has a legislation that defines what a no new tax revenue is a different calculation. And so that was really what the discussion was over, whether or not it should just be set as the city manager had proposed it in his budget, or should be at the no new revenue rate, which was something that the new council members had campaigned on.
It was interesting to watch the debate between the new council members and the returning members. The vote was split 4-3 exactly on the lines of who is new and who's returning. You voted against setting a no new revenue tax rate. Why did you oppose that, and why do you think it was important to go with the other rate?
Because we know what's coming in the following years. This budget talks about 1 year, and then we have a second budget. And we know what obligations are going to be out there. For example, I think you've heard Councilman Massingale talk about the South fire station. And we're going to have to put an entire company out there, not this year, but the next year, and it's so expensive when you start talking about salaries and benefits and equipment, all the things that we have to have out there. So those of us who've been on the council know what's coming. The other thing is we are limited by state statute to that 3.5% cap, and so we know how that affects us. The other issue I think that was on everybody's mind, particularly those of us who've been doing this for a while, had to do with sales tax. It is not static. We don't know. We've had some good years with sales tax. And in fact, surprisingly during COVID, it hung in there because people were buying more things, staying home, going online, purchasing, going to grocery stores and whatever. That we don't have any idea with what's going on in the nation right now and the state exactly how we're going to be on sales tax. It's hard to depend on sales tax, and the best we can do is to estimate what we think and put into the budget, and that was what was in the budget, which brought us to the tax rate that the city manager had proposed.
A lot of the council members who voted for the no new revenue rate argued that we can afford to do that because we had the best year for sales tax revenue that we've ever had, and that can kind of fill in the difference there. But you disagree. You think, does this set us up for a higher tax rate in the future because we may fall behind?
Yes, that's what's going to happen. The tax rate will go up. One thing that our citizens have always liked is to have stable rates, something that they can put into their budgets and count on. Think back about Lubbock Power and Light when the rates were not steady. People got really upset because one month their bill was high, next month it was low, and so stabilization of rates is very important when you're working towards the future. But this is just a 1 year that we're doing right now. And then there were a couple of things done that really were concerning by 2 of the new members by wanting certain items to be placed in the budget but done so funded by sales tax. When anytime you have an employee that you add, or 2, however many it is, those go into the operations, and they're every year thereafter. That position's created, that position has to be filled, and it has to be paid. Think about the city of Lubbock and the growth that we've had. Everybody says, well, that's more tax money for you. It also means we have more infrastructure needs. We have more demand for police officers, firefighters, employees. People want our parks to look pretty. They want the libraries to function. They want the dogs and cats that are out and loose. They want all of those things taken care of. We've got a street bond out there proposed right now. And the reason we do is because we're behind on streets. So it makes no sense to do a no new revenue rate because you're going to pay for it sooner or later.
The street bond is coming up very quickly. It is September 21st now, when the day we're doing this interview. The bond has been decided to be put on the ballot for a while now, and I remember when the council voted to put it on the ballot, you said we're going to do it differently this time. We're going to get out in front of public education efforts. We're going to form a political action committee to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes of last time and make sure it can get passed. Where are we on that? Because at least from what I've seen, I haven't seen a whole lot of progress being made in terms of campaigning or public education efforts.
As council people, we are limited. We cannot advocate for the bond. I can't be involved with the PAC. I can't really be involved with it other than a question and answer. I can answer what's on the bond, that type of questions, but I can't go out there and advocate for it. And that's a real disadvantage because the council members are the ones who know better what the streets are and why they're there. So that makes it a little difficult, and I am the same as you. I've not heard a lot about it.
So that's a concern from the council as well.
It is for me.
It's not up to you to advocate for this. That has to be from the outside, and you haven't seen anything yet.
No, I have not.
Interesting. Are you more optimistic this year that it will pass?
I don't know optimistic. I think that if people really look at the proposal, the streets that are proposed, and whether it's going to be, you know, expanded to a 5-lane or whether it's going to stay a 3-lane, if they really do their homework, and based on the input I get from people in the community, it should. But then there are people who vote against things for reasons that have nothing to do with whether or not it's a need or not. I don't think there's any question that it's a need. They need to be done, and we do not have the resources to do that without a bond. And that tax rate, of course, won't go up this year, but it would go up the following year for a period of time. Those are basically the same streets that were on the first bond, with the exception of Broadway. They did not put the Broadway street on it. But basically the same. The only difference now is that it's more expensive.
And is it more expensive because just costs across the board have risen over the last time, and you know, if we got it done in November, it just would have been cheaper, but now we're basically doing the same thing but for $25 million more. Is that about right?
Yeah, they added to it.
Yeah.
They added to it, yes. Everything's more expensive, whether it was asphalt, concrete, they're more expensive. Labor costs have gone up because it's hard to find some of the people that you need to operate the vehicles to do the road work. It's just tough. It's hard to find people with CDL licenses.
It'll be interesting to see how the voters make those decisions coming up this November. One more thing that I want to make sure to get to, though, is this issue of juvenile crime that you've brought up in front of the council recently, along with LPD Chief Mitchell. Flesh out this issue for people who may not be familiar, because it seems like this issue was brought up pretty recently, and I haven't seen the council talk about this before. What is the problem that this city is facing with juvenile crime, and what kind of resources do you believe we need to put towards combating it?
The city of Lubbock has had a juvenile curfew ordinance for a long time. Floyd Price will tell you that he was a police officer during that time, and he worked on that, he and Tom Nichols both. And so the ordinance has been there, but it has to be renewed if you're going to keep it every 3 years. You have to look at it again. Well, it just came up again. The 3-year time period just came up, so that's why I was talking about it, because in order to enforce the ordinance, you have to have officers who can work that part of it to find your juvenile offenders. And when I say offenders, I'm talking about kids who are out after hours. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the kiddos who are out stealing, committing crimes. We're not talking about them. We're just talking about kids who are out on the street at hours that they don't need to be. And so in order for the police to take care of that, they have to have the resources. We have 3 new patrol divisions. We have a place to take a juvenile that they pick up, say, at the park, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and they have to take that juvenile to a place and then contact their parents to come get them. And so we are going to designate one of those patrol divisions to be the place that will be open in those late hours or early hours, whichever, so that the police officer can bring the child to that place. He can go back and get on the street and do whatever he is supposed to do for his shift, but there'll be 2 officers there who will contact the parents and get them to come pick up. There are also fines that go with that. They can find the parent, they can find the kiddo too. And so to do that, you've got to have more resources. Chief Mitchell told us that they had talked about for a 3-month period, because they didn't have funding for it, that they could do it for 3 months, they thought, for $75,000. So that was what was put into the budget. The part I didn't like was the fact that they wanted it paid out of sales tax, which I don't think is appropriate, but it passed, it's done. So the problem is we have gangs, and we have gang members who are younger and younger, and these kids get recruited, sometimes at school, sometimes when they're out when they shouldn't be out, in places where they shouldn't be. So you start trying to prevent these bad things happening simply by enforcing an ordinance that's on the books. If you're not going to enforce it, you probably don't need it, is my opinion. But I think we need it. We need to give some guidance to the kids that are out and are being influenced by some of our gangs. I think the other day when we had the 3 juveniles who stole the car, did wheelies in somebody's parking lot, and they actually hit a police officer when he got out of his car. And those kids were breaking the law. They're going to detention, okay? There's no question about that. But it's the whole point of their ages, 14, 15, 16. We've got to do something to help our kids.
The idea is if you enforce curfews early before kids find their way into criminal behavior, that might be an early prevention measure.
That's exactly correct.
Interesting, okay.
It could be the same evening. He could just be out where he shouldn't be and thinking, well, I could break into that car, or I could go into somebody's garage, something like that. And maybe you can prevent that from happening.
Well, there's a lot of important issues that we'll continue to cover. I really appreciate you coming on Talking Points. Councilwoman Latrell Joy, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.